Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. Hopefully my voice is loud and clear and the audio is adjusted. The title for tonight's episode is that our humanism will transcend our culturalism. I wanted to speak about pretty much how I have connected certain ideas and how I have perceived the human condition. I have used two terms, humanism, culturalism, and in the subtitle I am talking about the operating system of the human being. In order to discover how something operates, we have to, in some sense, go to its past. And you can say when it comes to understanding anything in time, we have to, in some sense, articulate what the phenomenon meant in the past, what it means now, and what it will go on to mean. And if we can properly understand the past of something, we can understand how it is present. How many times in society have people been judged and the person just turns back and shouts, it's like, you don't know what kind of life I've lived, man, you don't know who I am, right? So what it means is that ultimately a sensory perception is not enough. And when we wonder about, if I can dive into it now, the operating system of the human being, I want to read something for you. I think I need to turn down the volume level. I want to read for the listeners the definition of an operating system. The low-level software that supports a computer's basic functions, such as scheduling tasks and controlling peripherals. Let us take, the first operating system, which I think, I'm not sure if it's Apple's Macintosh or it is Microsoft, but in some sense an operating system is what is allowing the software to function in the hardware. And so it is the underlying level of intelligence before, you know what it is? It's like the system that allows for the operation to take place. And I'm just some guy wondering about, the operating system of the human being. And we actually find ourselves in a very multi-dimensional system. That means the hardware is existence and the software is experience. And this software is in some sense operating in the hardware. We are minds functioning inside bodies, or as bodies, based on your existential philosophical disposition. So I was looking at this concept of the operating system. There's a software, there's a hardware. The system that operates is really the software. For the human being, it is the mind. And what the mind is doing is that, first let me explain it like this. Pretty much eyes open in a world. We look at this world, we notice that there is qualities of existence, and we notice that there is space. That means pretty much everybody on this planet should be able to distinguish instantly what is matter and what is space. So our world is actually like matter, hanging in space, just floating in space. That's that's the cosmic system. Now, this matter has somehow become aware of the hardware. That means when we use a software on a computer, the software responds to the hardware. That means the early computers, you just hold the shutdown key for a couple seconds and it's like an instant command for the whole thing to turn off. So it could be that certain movements to the hardware, if you drop the computer, the operating system can get damaged. If the body, in some sense, goes through turbulence, the way the mind projects itself in the outer realms will be inhibited. So really in this life, we have to take our hardware, we have to take care of our hardware. And the hardware is where the operating system happens, where the software beyond the hardware begins having a relationship with reality. Anyways, when I look at the concept of humanism, I am thinking of a universal human being. I'll tell you how I'm connecting it to the idea of this software-hardware analogy. And when I look at the concept of culturalism, it is in the specifics. So what that means is an object became a subject, okay? And the way that subject is experiencing the existence of the object will lead its perception. And its perception can be led to, you can say, a smaller view on reality, or a bigger view. The bigger view on reality is that we're all actually universal beings, even beyond galactic. That means somebody could be like, bro, I identify as an alien, and I'm like, man, think bigger, universal, be a universal being. And I would say the software, if it identifies with the hardware, or let me say it this way, if I right now identify with my most immediate environment, I would consider myself a Canadian citizen, a person named Amin using the online alias Mr.Within, it's as if like that, and being a human being, in Canadian society and all this. So this is like the culturalism, right? It's like a level of a realism, but more specific to the immediate location and how we interpret the immediate location. But if I was to wonder about my humanism, it would have nothing to do about where I was born, what symbols I use to identify myself. My humanism would be how the human experience goes beyond any ideological category. It's an event of nature, right? I mean, it is true. We look at a tree and we're like, yeah, from now on we're going to call this a tree. We look at like a cup and we're like, yeah, we looked at that object and we're like, from now on we're going to call it a cup. And we looked at land and we called it a nation, and we looked at ourselves in the mirror and we called that a person, right? This all has to do with the cultural identity, and I'm not suggesting a future where we don't have cultures, we don't have the specific, uniqueness of cultures, Eventually, I think in the future, there will be a level of globalization where individualism would be historic. So right now, me being an individual, you being an individual, and us not having realized that there's a collective presence in nature, or that can be in nature, we in some sense are like, it's a historic moment. It's like the minds, it's as if, 8 billion drops. You know what it is? It's like 8 billion ice cubes that haven't melted yet. And the moment they melt, they will realize they have an oceanic presence. When I consider humanism, it is really the human design is in focus, is prioritized. When I think about culturalism, the human design is filtered. The filter is the priority. That means here's the hilarious thing. We're all on one rock in the middle of nowhere, but the theatrics of individualism cause us to nationalize. Now, it's not that there's something wrong with that, but eventually we, in the middle of whatever identity games we play with the world or with ourselves, we will realize there's just a human being here, and the human dimension has an innocence to it and a sacredness, has a divinity to it. The eyes of the human being do not just belong to, a meaningless material realm. Our humanism can transcend our culturalism if one scenario of that would be if we stop deciding to behave like a human. excuse me, I misspoke. What I'm trying to say is that our humanism can transcend our culturalism if we identify with the human position before it's attached to ideology. So what does that mean? That means everybody, regardless of what philosophy they have, they're a human being in a human species. This is like the central pillar. This is the most important idea, that we are here as a human being, and we are here to be human, and in order to successfully be a human being that is being human, there requires levels of freedom. Now, culturalism is not freedom. There's so many people, not so many, but there has been notable scholars such as, Terence McKenna, where he has really, he has said something very profound where he says culture is not your friend. And many institutions, it's just pretty much ancient wisdom where they're like, hey, anything other than yourself is not considering your eyes. So in order to consider your eyes, you must honor the human archetype. Our humanism can transcend our culturalism if we stop identifying with language. We will just go back to being a silent experiential animal rather than the direct experience of the animal, like light reflecting off the surface of an object. It's like the direct experience reflects off as a subjective memory. The operating system of the human being, for now, right now in 2021 I'm speaking, there is no technological interference with it. There could be, non-biological, non-technological kind of interference, but that's very difficult to, not very difficult, but I'll bring it up at the end. There could be an interference, a sort of breach into the operating system of the human being, where the human being identified so much with an object that it rendered itself meaningless, and when a creature is meaningless, it can get defined by the environment or any stimulus that comes to it. We will find the great humanity. I mean, right now we're too busy as a species wanting to be individually important. We're so occupied by our physiological survival that people are ignoring their psychological survival, not realizing that after you have physically survived, you seek the survival of your mind. And the mind, the only way it will feel like it survived the lifetime is that it expresses itself, it goes all out. I say go all out, I'm not talking about V Vendetta explosion level. Like I'm talking about just like this sort of poetic moment with oneself, where whoever you are, you just look at your own biological body and you just go like, wow, there will come a time where my body, this body will no longer be mine. All of its elements will return to the natural world. And so it's as if we are the dream of nature. It's as if nature is dreaming of its own individualism, and human beings are appearing out of nowhere. Is truly a magnificent stage. It is the stage where all life forms activate. They just become what they are, you know. The listeners should not forget that ultimately I am just being a storyteller in a very strange situation. The operating system, there is a way the system is kept and is designed, and the operation is based on that. We human beings have taken the approach of knowledge, the path of knowledge, and that means we look at the system, we try to understand the system, and as we understand the system, the quality of our operation changes in the system. Now, we are functioning as human beings, but this idea is not that fixed in our minds, and let me tell you why. Because only when we are around other human beings, I have this theory that when we are around other human beings, we are a person and a personality. When we are alone, it's as if energy and attention are so raw that they're just being there. That means really when one is alone, I think this is why many people don't like solitude and loneliness, not realizing that it is where you find yourself before you are a self. He said, the animal has an inner space. Its inner space gets filled by sensory experience. Sensory experience now in this modern age is being filtered through the I thought, the individual. The individual is the source of meaning, both inner and outer for now. Until the ego, the I, the construct, that means that the concept of the person self notices. That means whoever you are right now listening to me, for a moment just don't do anything and wonder about what is looking through your eyes. You will notice it is attributeless. So the true state of mankind is a witness beyond attributes. The system is so big that if we were to try to attempt to understand it, we would never get to the end of it. That means the road of human knowledge has no ending, and knowledge can be infinite, and there will be infinite, explorers in this realm as far as we go. Whether giant robots are waiting for us, in unknown waters, or whether we become such a multidimensional being that there is no such thing as even humanism, maybe in the very far future. There is the view of intelligence and experientially moving as intelligence, but the notion that we are a certain thought in the void, it could be null. It could be there could be experiences of nature that nullify the past to the future. In the chat section, Lorna says, do you think we'll ever get back to our roots and not need machines anymore? I would use the metaphor in this sense, where, Lorna, I would tell you the tree's roots are in the soil and the fruit of the tree is the machine. So that means mankind is always rooted in nature because we're a natural breathing entity. That's your connection to nature. So your roots are always there in the same way the roots of a tree are inside the soil. And we can't see the roots, but the roots are there holding it. So the roots, the whole concept of the root is that it's like wherever you are, it's your original connection, That means we're connected to nature, whether we like it or not. Now, machines, if you consider them as fruit, look at what's so fascinating about nature. That a tree gives fruit, but the tree has no reason to give fruit. And what I mean by that is that the fruit, it's like sometimes when I look at an apple, it freaks me out how it's the size of our hand, right? That means either we as an evolutionary creature adjusted to the size of fruits, or in some sense, mysteriously trees adjusted. Nature adjusted to man, or man adjusted to nature. Because we have the, Darwinian survival of the fittest idea, so it's man adjusting to nature, But I will tell you that the tree creates a fruit, And that fruit is for man, for another being. Sometimes when I look at the geometry of nature, I am like, who is nature living for? And the answer is that it's living for itself, but itself is connected to everything else. So in some sense, nature somehow is a system where the selfishness of the animal instinct maintains the animal in a sort of Camus, but it's unconscious. I mean, think about how mind-blowing this is. Just whoever's listening to me, just think about how mind-blowing that this idea is, that right now, all of the amount of information that the human species is aware of, if other animals, when we look at other animals, let's say penguins, lions, or whatever, when we look at other animals, they have no clue that there is this much possibility of depth of perception, right? For example, a pet owner's pet, won't know why the pet owner is voting for let's say, a certain type of political party, let's say in their country or whatever, right? The animal has no clue of how much superior dimensions are there. But when we clicked into self-awareness in a very more sophisticated way in regards to language use and just being a creature that is aware of its own death. And what I mean by that is aware that it in some sense at some point ends. Many animals in nature, they're just living moment to moment. They don't have a consideration that, okay, after 100 years, I'm out of here. So we have access to a ridiculous amount of perception that other species don't. And the reason we have access to it is because we evolved and we changed our experiential strategy toward existence. Like sometimes you gotta wonder why we're not in jungles, being wild animals, Right now, I'm giving this podcast on a balcony in Canada where human civilization has progressed this far. And when I look at animals like birds and squirrels, I'm like, holy shit, how far behind are the other species? And why are we so ahead as a species? And just by having a new awareness, look at the amount of behaviorism that we got access to. Just think about it, right? We wear clothing, we get into vehicles, go to our destinations, we care for each other's emotions, And it's not that animals don't care, inferior species. It's not like they don't care. It's just that we managed to open a door that the brains of many other species has not. And language has to do with it. Noam Chomsky, in one of his lectures, I remember him saying one sentence, and it was so heavy, it was so deep for me that it was inspirational. And Noam Chomsky was giving a date about language, and he said language was imported. And when he said imported, of course he's a man of science, but when it comes to that notion that language was imported, to me it felt like this creature received a download, or somebody connected a USB drive to it, or some sort of intervening force awakened this animal to the fact that it is an animal. Many other species don't even identify themselves. They're just like biological programs being implemented, expressing. The human being has choice in its expression. You know, in my youth, I was shy. Only if I had known I had evolved 4.5 billion years. You know, there was a journey of 4.5 billion years for the human being to be here, for us to be an individual. Our emotions are trying to hide the truth. Emotions can be a blindfold, but they can also be a sort of backup system to nihilistic anguish. And this is very important because if you are a materialist and you're considering that ultimately life is meaningless because it's just found in an empty scenario, and it's all just material, it's all material phenomena, then emotions are like the transcendentalism, right? Emotions are the miraculous nature of things, you know? That means it's like, you know, it's like seeing the atheist bash the poor theist, you know, with a giant textbook. And then the atheist, you know, later on, you know, in a different moment, reading poetry and trying to connect to the vaster transcendental position of the realm. You know, I am telling you, we're all acting to ourselves with a sort of subconscious view. You know what it is? That means even though I am speaking right now and my visual sensory perception is through my eyes, but right now I could visualize if I was standing in front of myself, how would I be seeing myself from those eyes? Right? So the mind's abstract ability to simulate or copy paste reality and then manipulate it. It's like our brain, which is the body, is simulating a mind, and that mind that is simulated is conscious that it's simulated by the body and is simulating back instructions and command codes back to the body. So right now when I'm speaking, it's this strange cycle of eyes open, world perceived, that world echoed into the inner realms. In the inner realms, all the information of the past got a chance to connect to what was seen in front of the eyes. And then, it is in some sense, if the inner realms goes faster than the outer realms, there's something to say. If the inner realms are going slower than the outer realms, there's no one to say it. Human psychology, once considered to be a simulating thing, something that we simulated, we pulsated into reality. This means that the era of the individual person is over, and this is why social media is really fake, because it captures fragments of a film and gives the illusion that the film is the fragment. That means if somebody thinks that one of these Mr. Within, in listening to one of these Mr. Within talks, they can know who I am, it's like watching a scene of a film and then concluding you know what the whole film is. But I am saying that we can never know what the whole film is, and the resolve towards this is as long as we are an individual human, we suffer. But if we are collective space and intelligence has nothing to do with being individual collective, it's unconditional, then the concept of freedom and liberty will mean something different. That means a way that humanism is going to transcend culturalism is because culturalism is going to break, and what's going to remain is going to be the human being. That means if right now extraterrestrials land on Earth, or let's say in the future an advanced robotic technology is made, and we consider two conditions to each of them, where if extraterrestrials landed, they could be friendly or they could be fierce, you know, and if AI opens its eyes, it could be friendly, it could be fierce, two types of possibilities for each. if there is some sort of phenomenology in the outer realms that causes us fear, that causes us some sort of hardship, in our physiological survival through that hardship, we may even sacrifice our humanism. That means it was like there was this very incredible comedian, very far-sighted comedian, deep thinker, and this man by the name of Joe Rogan, in one of his stand-up comedy bits, he's talking about if human beings suddenly lost all of knowledge and they went back to a post-apocalyptic time, it's like how long would it be until all of knowledge was forgotten and people had descended to the level of a sort of rekindling of their animalism. The greatest challenge on this earth currently is to try to find a sort of, it's like a rare lifestyle. It's like trying to find the phoenix of lifestyles where we find a way that the human being can function where it maximizes its utility and efficiency in the outer realms and maximizes its efficiency in the inner realms. The efficiency in the inner realms, as ancient wisdom suggests, is maximized instantly. So instantly enlightenment can happen. I'll end that there. But in the outer realms, to maximize efficiency, we have to, in some sense, respond to the future of something. That means it's like throwing a bowling ball and then caring to see where it goes. Right now, in civilization, a lot of human beings are expressing information, communication, but they're not caring where the bowling ball goes, right? It's as if we're living a life where, to our eyes, we are here once, not realizing the planet's gonna be required to be used by future generations. Sometimes when I see these climate change advocates, these people who talk about climate change and they're really passionate about it, to me, it sometimes feels it's like people who have realized that you can't take the shopping cart outside of the grocery, outside of the mall, like, what do you call it? Outside of the grocery store. What that means is it belongs to the planet. And so even though we are simulating our psychology and living in time right now, we have to be considerate as a species that the same room, it's as if we have rented life for 100 years and then we're out of the picture and other human beings emerge, then we're out of the picture and other human beings emerge, And so eventually there will be a human language of experience acknowledged. You know what that means? That means our human design makes us human beings understand each other better than any sort of communication. That means two people from two different languages could be arguing and both of them speaking their own language, and a third bystander is like, what are these two people doing, and they're both angrily talking. Or you can suddenly see that moment where both people who are arguing, they get hungry, and when they get hungry they both stop and go eat food. And so that's the humanist language. That's the language of direct experience of the human being, where our human experience is connecting us to others who are also having a human experience. And this is really where empathy comes from, because we just fathom our own eyes and the eyes of the other, and their suffering becomes real to us, and then the human being can help. I really think about the future of the species, and I really care for it, but on some level I know that there is no way we're gonna like remain human in the future, in the far future. I'll give it a time span of, let's say, we carry on this human algorithm for 10,000 years. after 10,000 years, there's no way it's just going to be like we've been there, done that to such a degree that I think the intelligence of this universal sector will realign. That means Shakespeare is known for his famous line, I believe it's from Hamlet, where he says to be or not to be. Oh, sorry, Romeo and Juliet. Or I'm not sure exactly which work of his it is, but there is this famous sentence to Shakespeare. You know, in Shakespeare's work, to be or not to be, and in the future of humanity, it's going to be human or not to be human. You know, the being part is not going to be judged. People are going to realize energy cannot be created or destroyed if consciousness is a type of energy. So it means we have to start preparing for human beings in the future, realizing that on some existential level they can never die, but on an experiential level there's infinite change. So it's as if it's not that we're just human beings dying, we're human beings dying in an infinite system preserved by the void. And we're not 100% certain as a species whether it's all, you know, if there is something such as mind stuff, you know. The mind is our greatest clue. It is literally, for me, like that one thing that I am trying very hard to make people wonder about. Because you have one lifetime to really use this instrument of intelligence. And based on your experience in this form, in this life format, you know, then if you experience something beyond this life, you go beyond it. If you experience in this domain, the attention will just remain here. Thank you, Lorna, in the chat section. You know, I am thinking if giant robots were walking between, like, you know, between buildings in the downtown area, you know, of a city, let's say. That would be a sort of, you know, that would kind of be like culture, maybe transcending humanism, I'm not sure. Because the thing is, culture is a story which is a coagulation of like all the human beings in that culture kind of inputting behavior into the system. You know what it is? It's like culture is the language that a nation speaks. Very poetically speaking, culture is the language of a nation. You know, it's as if it's like a nation's identity, and really what culture is, it is the behavior of people. I mean, I remember listening to this very profound lecture where it was going on about, in some sense, how language, it actually, how would I say it, there was meaning before there was language. That means you can imagine, for example, a caveman seeing another cave person, you know, and the caveman's noticing a giant rock about to fall on one of the other cavemen, you know, and one of the cavemen, and what happens is like the caveman just shouts. There is no vocabulary, there is no dictionary, there is no grammar, there is no sentence structure, there is no personal identity. There is just there is no ideological identity. And what the creature does is it's just the caveman shouts at the other caveman, making noises. So that means there is inner realm experiential meaning, right? So meaning is actually more ancient than language. So there could be meaning in life, even though if you find yourself in a moment where there is no language or there is no words for it, you know. It's like somebody who says a sunset is beautiful, then all the scientists in the world are like, how is it beautiful? You have to explain exactly how. And the person's like, I don't know, man. It's just I like the colors and it's beautiful to me. And it's as if like a level of human psychology where there is no rationality or irrationality. It's just sensation based on if the experience is pleasant or if it's not. And that has to do with our DNA. That means by the nature of each of us having a different DNA and each of us having different eyes, even though we can have a sort of logic and rationality of what we're considering facts in the outer realms, variables that don't change. But I am telling you, it's as if because our eyes each start from their own universe and climb out to discover the outer universe, there are no person's logic will be the same, because it's literally like you see, you know what it is? It's like for me, it doesn't matter if somebody's trying to like buy a refrigerator or a physicist is trying to solve the biggest problem. In physics. Let me tell you why there is no difference. Because in the refrigerator example, there's how would I say it? It's like the refrigerator salesman comes up to the person. It's like, sir, this is the newest model of the refrigerator. Its doors open automatically. This refrigerator reads your mind. This refrigerator, takes care of your children. Like, you don't have to go to the daycare. You're like, imagine like this guy's selling the shit out of this refrigerator's from the future. A time traveler once put a sandwich inside it. Like the salesman's trying to like sell the refrigerator and just gives all the specifics, all the information about the refrigerator, but ultimately the person buying the refrigerator emotionally selects. So after all our rational analysis, because reality is sensation-based, we will go based on an emotional preference. So what that means is it's not just what you find. When it comes to culture, it's how you feel about what you find. And this is why scientists are like, why aren't children being fascinated by science? Because there's a disconnection from the type of information we need to survive in culture. Because currently, we have not realized we're universal beings. It's as if the universe, we're either acting too humble to be universally intelligently present, or we are too egotistical. We're like, it's as if it's like man looked at the sky and, felt more infinite than the sky. That's like a high level of ego. Can you imagine in the future when people are getting into an argument where, one person's being more egotistical than another, a technology like this, AI program comes in just in the middle of two people debating, says ego levels, rising, and suddenly one person's ego level is above 75%, that means 75% more than the other person. They feel they're certain about what reality is. I feel we have moved past the era of truths. I think human beings are getting bored of truth upon just the realization that the system's too big to figure it out. So what we need to figure out is what is the best long-term strategy that provides the longest endurance for there to be an opportunity for the future generations to tackle the big questions, you know. It's all about the future. We have avoided the future, you know. We have felt the future is an illusion because the past was. I mean, it is true. If there was no language and symbolism, you know, there would be no such thing as time. The time is a mental event. The concept of time is a mental event. But the concept of space is not a mental event. What's in the space, such as matter, that means right now I can totally feel how I'm a physical object. You know, I can move my biological body, I can move my attention, and if I was to close my eyes, I would still have access to my outer, you know, like my sensations of my body, like from how the wind is, for example, hitting my skin and all this, right? So I have awareness, even though my eyes are closed, I have awareness to the outer realm sensations. But now the visual component, so that means if we have kind of like five senses, five major senses, when we close our eyes, it's as if we are entering a universe that is 4 out of 5 full, right? So there is only 1/5 of a gap, and what many people consider imagination is how memory is filling up the visual component to the physicality of the moment. And there is no such thing as memory. I would say it's like a field, right? It's not a file cabinet, you know, or a photo album. Our intelligence is really a field, and based on what field it is, it accesses the information of the field. So if I suddenly talk about like ancient Greece, it's as if in my inner realms I'm going back to that context. And when I go back into that context and wonder how would life be if I was living in ancient Greece, for example, then I enter that field of thought, that atmosphere of, you know, humanism, you know. Or if I think about anything else, or even if I think about the future, I enter that atmosphere. So the inner realms, somehow we as a creature have found, we have found a way to close our eyes but still see something, and that is a remarkable achievement. That we can close our eyes, yet there is sight. You know, this was one of those big mysteries for me, where I'm like, wait a minute, they say we need light to see something, but when a person closes their eyes and remembers like a sunny day, and they can actually visualize that sunny day and their eyes are closed, you know, and let's say they're in a completely different moment, that means you didn't need light to remember. And so it could be that certain percentage of what we consider is reality is like, it's like the memory field, and certain percentage of it is actual reality, right? So it's very, like, when I talk about the inner realms and outer realms, our civilization is just getting introduced to this concept. You know, I'm kind of trying to like bring it back, but I'm saying, like, if we were to really take it seriously through a multidimensional level of research, it would be like a very micro analysis, where we're going into the details of what constitutes as a movement of the mind, and what constitutes as the movement of the body. And if these two films, imagine two films are playing at the same time on a wall from two different projectors, right? So it's as if two simulations of reality overlaid in one, and the person is starting in that, wondering what the meaning is of life. Everybody has an operating system. Their internal operating system is the story they tell themselves. The story they tell themselves usually is justified by direct experience, and I don't know how to say it. But it's like there may be moments in life where people may feel tired of in some sense repetitive selfhood. So the only thing left will be to go towards the new. That means a species that believes the past found the truth doesn't step into the future. It sinks with the ship, kind of like the captain of the Titanic. But those eyes that find the future will reserve a seat for you. And sometimes I think, like, what is, like, if it took us 4.5 billion years to have egos and create a linguistic simulation, what is the proper way that human beings stop identifying with the language that is possessing their ability to be a real entity? And I think humor, I think the theme of compassion, playfulness, humor, just the flexibility enough for the mind to be in a sort of liquid state rather than an obsession for a solid or enlightened gas state, you know? You know, it's hilarious. The world is waiting to be discovered by itself. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. This concept is so vast that I would encourage everybody to think about the destiny of the human idea and how cultures evolve. You know, cultures evolve in the eyes of certain theorists in accordance to how fast the language evolves. Right? So if the language of an environment is cruel, the people will automatically be cruel because they have to use that language to animate into personhood. Right? If the language of a system is kind, the people will automatically be kind. And if we can somehow reform the system we're operating in accordance to one where the problems we see don't exist, at least the psychology will be content enough to bring the future forth. And so we should not fear anything because there's nothing to fear, literally. And at the same time, we should use the opportunity of human consciousness. Like some people, some scholars say, it's such a miracle that we even exist in this solar system, you know, and the earth is not so close to the sun that we're burning, and it's not so far away that we're freezing, and the equator is tilted exactly at an angle that is just right, you know, and human beings have an atmosphere, and they have vegetation, and they in some sense have all of this going on. You know, imagine I just got a tangent line of a thought where it's kind of like imagining if an extraterrestrials land, human beings have good relationships with the efficient, kind relationships with the alien, where certain aliens come to live on Earth and certain human beings go live on that alien planet. Now, those aliens that are living on Earth, we would have to be like, imagine they become human citizens, right? So that would mean the alien is identifying as a human. So imagine an extraterrestrial walking in the street, but you talk to the extraterrestrial, imagine its name is, you know, I don't know, you know, Sarah or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like the extraterrestrial has humanized. And so it's when thinking about that extraterrestrial, is that extraterrestrial human when it's in a human civilization? Or is our humanism beyond anything our culture can identify? That means it's as if like the temple is the biological body and devotion is what is within it. First, the human being has to love itself, to care for itself, and then the human being has to love others, to care for others. Now, after we're done caring for ourselves and others, we'll care for our world. After we're done caring, let's say for the planet, we care for the galaxy. After we're done caring for the galaxy, Dalai Lama, compassion to the power of infinity, we start caring for the universal sector. And so we have done our performance here as a species. Imagine like 10,000 years have gone by, we've overpopulated like a galaxy. Interstellar cities are everywhere in space. Our understanding of reality has gotten to a point where there's multiple dimensions to what the human being meant, like what we are as a biological human being right now. If there is a hope for it to be preserved in the future, it will go on to the philosophies of the future generation as the main trunk, like the main branch where everything, all other types of humanism, cyber-humanism, or abstract humanism in regards to your inner realms, all of these will be denominations of that one. It's like the geometry of our biology is the most important information that we have to work with. So it's like the first branch. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Remember, we are here to be human first, and then be explorers of other states of mind and whatever. And to be human means to be conscious that your inner realms have an opportunity to share your eyes with the outer. For truth cannot make a mistake if it is truth. Namaste.